Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
You know what? Fuck it. I know that everyone's going to be mad at me, but this is not going to be a drama thing. You know, if it becomes too stupid, we could always quit, you know? I don't typically do these react debate shit. I don't typically do this stuff. But because I really like Professor Wolff, I mean, we've had a Wolff emote for how long? Get some DSA Wolffs in the chat. Like, we love Professor Wolff. This is why I'm interested in it. All right, let's watch this stupid shit.
It is now my pleasure to introduce today's competitors. Arguing in favor of socialism is Richard D. Wolff, a professor of economics who's previously taught at Yale and is also the host of Economic Update as well as Democracy at Work. He's authored several books on both Marxism and socialism, as well as a recent one covering the COVID epidemic called The Sickness is the System. Arguing in favor of capitalism is Stephen Bunnell II.
Juicing his gamer brain with Red Bull. Oh my god, that's amazing. That's my first reaction.
Known under the pseudonym Destiny, he began as a professional StarCraft 2 player and went on to revolutionize politics on the Twitch streaming platform. He's gone on to debate many of the largest public figures on both the right and the left corners of the political spectrum. Recently, he's become involved in campaigning for local politicians and well as the
By the way, chat, how did his campaigning for local politicians work? He supported Mark Gudgel, right? What was? How did he do? Wait a minute. Destiny's endorsement was taken down. What happened? He used to be on the Wikipedia page. When was it edited? That should be restored. So I was cringe because I supported Bernie Sanders. Remember that, chat. I'm cringe because I support Bernie Sanders. But finishing 5th out of 5. I'm sorry. I had to stop that because the serfs called Destiny involved in local politics. So I had to see how that went. Sorry about that.
Detractors on both sides have labeled him either a communist or a fascist. He prefers the moniker as the omni-liberal.
Okay, I want to stop right there. The reason why Destiny calls himself an omni-liberal, because this is his debate tactic. He employs what's known as the Socratic method, which puts you in the learned, wise position, and you just ask questions of the person, right? You never actually advance anything. You never actually have a position to defend. You just try to find the weak points in your opponent's argument because they have an actual position. They have an actual belief system. Omniliberalism basically means he doesn't have to defend anything because he made it up. And it's whatever he needs it to be in the moment. There's a really good video by Innuendo Studios on these debate tactics. You should really check it out. His tactic seems more like debate via interrogation as opposed to Socratic. That's probably more fair, Admiral Coffee. I'm being too good faith.
Richard Wolff.
Okay, in the 3 minutes I have, I cannot speak as fast as you just did, so I won't even try. I'll try to make a couple of basic points. Every economic system in the history of the world displays the following pattern. It is born, it evolves over time, and then it dies and passes away, giving way to another one. And part of that process has always been the conviction of the people in each economic system that sooner or later they can, they should, and they will do better, overcome some of the problems and difficulties they're facing, and organize a system that better meets human needs. The process is sometimes relatively smooth, other times it's rocky. That varies with the conditions and particularly with the level of resistance from those who don't want to see the system change and shift.
Great points by Wolff.
Capitalism, in my judgment, has been born, most would agree, has evolved over the last 3 centuries or so, and is now at that last stage. The only question now is exactly how and when the passing occurs. Likewise, in my judgment, the yearning for something better has built up in capitalism.
Kind of want to speed up the time,
to a pretty intense level now. Whether you look at the debts of students, whether you look at the mind-bending inequality that this system generates over and over again, unless and until it is revolted against by masses of people who do something about the inequality, only to discover that as long as capitalism remains, the tendency to inequality resumes. I think people are also tired of the instability. Every 4 to 7 years, capitalism crashes. We've had 3 in this new century in its 20 years. Yep, right on schedule, every 4 to 7 years. Millions lose their jobs. Businesses go belly up. Cities and towns can't get the revenue they need to provide the services we depend on. One sign of the exhaustion of this system, a level of money creation, a level of debt creation we have never seen. Government debt, corporate debt, personal debt. The system is exhausted, and the entire private enterprise system is now on 24/7 government life support. I think it's over. I think that's difficult for us all to live through. And we better learn some lessons from the British Empire, from which they have been tumbling for a century. We could and should do better on the downswing than the British have been able to. And the more we talk about it and discuss it and explore it, the better our chances to make another progressive transition to a better system that we all need and will benefit from.
Okay, Destiny?
All right. As of March 2021, Americans rank the economy, job markets, the handling of the coronavirus, and leadership in Washington as the 4 most important challenges facing our country. Socialist policies would not alleviate any of these concerns. Countries have tried.
Starting off your debate with a opinion poll about what people rank as important, and then immediately going to an assertion that socialist policies wouldn't help any of those things from a single... This is... Really? That's your... Okay.
Countries have tried the socialist experiment. Time and time again, this has failed. Doctors in Cuba moonlight as taxi drivers. Countries with socialized healthcare haven't fared much better than the U.S. in their handling of the coronavirus. And any socialist regime will never...
First of all, socialist healthcare systems provide provision of healthcare. Public health policy and random mutations of a virus have nothing to do with the type of economic distribution you have. Now, if you actually look at the countries that have best responded to coronavirus, they have been left-wing countries. Vietnam, New Zealand under the Labour Party, under Jacinda Ardern, the most left-wing prime minister they've had in decades. China had the most effective lockdowns in the world before we even had any kind of treatment or any kind of understanding of the coronavirus's transmissibility. China, with the origin of the virus, handled it, or at least we believe, the most effectively. What is he talking about? It was the right-wing countries of Brazil and the United States that suffered the most mightily, and now it looks like India under Modi, another fascist right-winger, have done bad. He's not even right on this. Cuba did really good on corona as well. Don't forget, Cuba is the only country in Latin America that developed the COVID-19 vaccine. Like, if there's anything about the Cuban system that they get right, it's the healthcare system. They have so many more doctors, and they have such a higher life expectancy than similarly situated countries. They're actually providing doctors and training all over the world constantly. As a country that has been under sanction of the United States for over 60 years. Economic sanction to the world superpower and largest market 60 miles offshore. They're sanctioned, and they still have remained. Well, Cuba is a terrible example.
Necessarily involve the bureaucracy of Washington even more heavily in our economy. Any country that has attempted to realize a fully...
Bureaucracy of Washington? Is he a conservative? These are conservative dog whistles. Bureaucracy of Washington. Joe Biden is pushing for a lot more regulation. Even he is. What?
Socialist economy has either failed completely, such as in the case of the USSR, destroyed large swaths of their...
The USSR fell because of a political crisis, not an economic crisis. Some of it had to do with the economic catastrophe that was the Chernobyl accident, but like the CIA at the time, didn't think the Soviet Union was about to collapse because it wasn't an economic collapse. It was a political collapse. What kind of retconning is this? It's not even historically true. What the fuck is he talking about? And Russia went from having the 8th or 9th largest economy in the world before the revolution to the 2nd largest economy in the world. And the USSR was not passed until the 90s by Japan. What the hell are you talking about? And Russia's population is not large.
Their economy, such as in Venezuela, or been forced to embrace more neoliberal economic policies to realize true growth in their economy, such as in China or Vietnam. Liberal
China and Vietnam are doing neoliberalism. Okay. Yeah, that's not.
market
Yeah.
policies work better in both theory and practice when it comes to efficiently allocating resources to maximizing the economic productivity of any country. And we've seen this play out time and time again across a wide variety of markets and countries throughout history across.
Not true at all. The fastest growing economies in world history was the USSR and China. And then I think it was South Korea under the 5-year plans of their military junta, which used used basically central planning. Now, they were right wingers and did call themselves socialists, but it was a planned development. It was not free markets. And then, if you look at the country that's grown the fastest in the last 20 years in South America, it was Bolivia under the Evo Morales and the movement towards socialism. This is not even accurate. Like, what?
Oftentimes, people like Richard Wolff will bring up the boom-bust cycle as though it's an inherent flaw of capitalism, but I believe I speak for most when I say that a boom-bust cycle is preferable to just going bust, as so many socialist countries have. It's also important for us to realize that no economic organization is in and of itself inherently moral or immoral, but rather we ought to view them as tools to effect some greater output for our country that we can later utilize and distribute in the most fair manner with government policy.
Fair is a moral judgment. Fair, he said it, we should use it as moral, and then he said the word fair. Does he not know what fair is? It's a value judgment. I mean, if you're going to argue morality shouldn't affect economics, you shouldn't then go, well, most fair. Determining what is fair is morality. I mean, I hate to make such a pedantic point, but this is your opening statement. You prepared this.
To most of our citizens as we see fit, creating a bigger pie, so to speak, from which all of us can eat. Morality and justice should exist in the realm of government policy. We cannot allow it to blind us to the economic.
Government policy is economic policy. Our economic system is determined by government policy, which you just said when you said that Venezuela failed because of the government policy on the economy, because they're intertwined. Why? This is undergrad level fuck ups.
Economic reality surrounding us. No matter how much we wish a wild lion not to eat us, our desire alone will never satiate its appetite. While socialism may sound good in theory, the destruction it would wrought on the wealth of our country and the oppressive restrictions it placed on our businesses would not help the vast majority of Americans. It'd be foolish to enforce protectionist or socialist policies on our economy while major developing economies, such as India and China, are moving in the exact opposite direction.
China, first of all, China did extensively protectionist policies, and they still have protectionist policies to this day. You as a foreigner cannot own a business in China. You have to be a minority partner. You as a foreign-born person cannot gain Chinese citizenship. They are extremely protectionist. This is like basic fact level knowledge law. Like, what? How do you not know this?
Having realized time and time again the failures in socialist planning. Socialism implies two major things: a change in both the means and mode of production. The means of production change in such a way to completely disallow private investment or ownership, and a change in the mode of production such that we no longer produce goods and services for a profit. Instead, businesses are only started with the approval of some governmental body, some kind of central planning, with the equal decision-making and management of every worker, and the goods and services produced in any
Okay, central planning is a tool that it can exist in any form of government. It doesn't necessarily mean socialist. You could have a centrally planned economy with a fascist government. That's not socialism. That's just central planning. The United States did central planning during World War II. Did he not know that? That the United States did central planning in World War II? Is this real life?
Society are what some government body dictates, irrespective of market forces or the wants and desires of the citizens. It's likely in the course of this debate that my opponent will suggest we take after Nordic or Western European countries, citing that things like socialized healthcare or subsidized education are powerful programs.
Why do you think it's called socialized healthcare?
Many of the underserved needs of Americans today. While this is true, I would like to remind everyone that we've spent the last decade reminding conservatives that the government simply providing welfare has absolutely nothing to do with socialism. My opponent believes that strong social safety nets and welfare.
Okay, that is not okay. The government doing things is not socialism necessarily, but the movements that got the political conditions required to have the government do things were socialist movements. They were trying to decommodify things, take them away from profit-making institutions and firms in the economy, and have them provide these services socially and allocate resources not due to market demands, but social and political demands. And the groups and organizations that did that accomplished that in Nordic countries, were socialist movements and socialist parties arguing against capitalism and market logic, and instead in favor of the public provision of needed and necessary services. And the outcome has been incredibly positive, and proven that markets are actually not the most efficient way to provide and plan the distribution of resources in an economy. So are Nordic countries fully socialist? No. But are the Nordic policies that people point to the result of socialist or capitalist politics? The answer is socialist politics. They were policies proposed by people like Professor Wolff in social democratic parties and socialist parties. And I don't know if you know this, but social democracy, let's go to the Wikipedia page. God, this is cringe. But I think if we go to Wikipedia, maybe someone just edited this. Okay, so it got edited back. Somebody tried to edit this. Someone tried to edit this, and it got reverted. Oh my God! A Destiny Stand tried to edit it! Social democracy is a political, social, and economic philosophy within socialism. Basically, it's reformist socialism. The idea that you could use liberal democratic institutions to enact socialism over time, gradually, as well as the reformist wing of democratic socialism. Yeah? Listen, I don't think social democratic policies that are proposed, like, for example, if you had enacted all of Bernie Sanders' policies, that would be social democratic policies, and we wouldn't be in socialism. But does that mean Bernie Sanders is not a socialist? No, because we wouldn't stop there. These are transitional policies toward a social framework. We're trying to transition from this strict capitalist framework to another one. I mean, this is just pedantic bullshit, but like, it's pathetic.
Most liberals who welcome him with open arms, me included. Consequently, there are 5 major hurdles that
no, they wouldn't. You called Medicare for All the Fifth Reich of healthcare.
Socialist I have ever spoken to is adequately addressed, and they are as follows. Number 1, what level of violence is acceptable for you to reach our socialist state? Number 2, how do we decide which businesses are allowed to exist in a socialist society without
What is the acceptable level of violence to maintain the status quo? This is a stupid fucking argument.
Private capital investment? 3, is any form of investment whatsoever allowed in a socialist society for an expansion of business? 4, how are labor markets determined in a socialist society? And 5, how do we calculate which goods and services a nation needs if we do away with the commodity form? Those are my 5.
Cool.
Wait, right, so he literally just asked 5 questions. He's just trying to ask questions. All right, well then you're going to get a lecture. I hope he doesn't complain about getting a lecture.
I guess begin now.
Where do you want to start?
Can I respond to what was said?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, whatever you want to do, yeah.
Okay. I find this a laughable caricature of anything I've ever written or anything that I understand is part of this conversation. And I don't appreciate being told what I think or what I say or what I mean or what I intend. I can speak for myself, and that would just be fine if we could allow each other to.
I mean, this is something Destiny does. He does strawman so hard. So it is great to see Professor Wolff having the same reaction that I did to talking to this fucking cretin.
To do that, number 1. Number 2, I have no idea what this silly remark that I hear so often is, that no socialist society has succeeded at anything. I have no idea what you're talking about. Let me give you an example. One of the most important metrics used in the economics profession around the world to assess the quote-unquote success of an economic system is the rate of economic growth. You measure GDP and you look at how it grows over time. And then you compare one country to another to assess their relative success, not as societies, because that's a vague generality, but at this particular metric, which we use in economics to measure economic growth over time. It's not the only metric, but it's a widely used one. So I'm now going to use it. In the 20th century, the fastest growing metric, the fastest growing GDP in any country measured was the Soviet Union. And in the 21st century we're living in, the fastest growing GDP in the world has been the People's Republic of China. This is not an endorsement of one or another economic system. It's a statement of fact verified by any reliable source of information. The UN, the project in the University of California, Berkeley, and others who keep track of this.
What I said earlier,
so this
Chad.
has
So
to
there
be
you go.
understood
Easy.
because in much of the world, economic growth is a shared objective and goal that these two societies have excelled at achieving. Number one. Number two, when it comes to socialism, it would be useful if we all understood what the word means rather than playing around with caricatures. For example, the notion that socialism is all about what the government does has been contested throughout the history of socialism. And that idea is less dominant within the socialist tradition now than it ever was over the last 150 years. For example, today, one of the most important issues for socialists has to do not with government regulation, not with government owning and operating businesses, not with these bugaboos of bureaucracy and all the rest of it, but has to do with an objective of transforming the organization of production in a factory, in an office, in a store, not to have a small group of people, the owner, the board of directors, the tiny little minority at the top that is a dictatorial power inside an enterprise, making all the key decisions that the employees have to live with, even though the minority making those decisions is not accountable to those employees. That's a socialism of transformation at the micro level about which very little could have been discerned in the comments preceding these. If we're going to talk about socialism, then we have to talk about what it means to the people pushing for it and urging it. And those people have learned from the 20th and 21st century, just like those who pushed for capitalism 3 centuries ago learned from their early experiments how to refine, how to adjust, and how to change. To pretend that that didn't happen, to trade in old and shrinking conceptions of socialism may be good debating ploy, but it doesn't advance our understanding of anything.
Okay, if you want, it'd be easier to have a more of a back and forth rather than the super long monologues each, so we can respond to each other.
What? That wasn't even long. I thought that Wolff was gonna go and that was like totally that was like a couple paragraphs. What? He's complaining right off the bat? Dude asked 5 questions. Someone takes 5 minutes to answer. You took more than a minute to answer my questions. People like this guy.
The more, if you're okay with that. Just for a couple of things you said. So I'm trying not to miss.
I just talk slower than you.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. My understanding is that in the 20th century, there was a faster growing economy than the USSR, and it was Japan. Japan still exists today, and the USSR does not. I understand that the USSR did show a huge amount of growth, but I think it's odd to use that as an example when socialists often point to the evils of imperialism, and when you point out the fact that everybody was heavily industrializing around that time as well. I don't think it's fair to say that the USSR simply grew on the merits of socialism when there were so many other things happening at the time, and when it was outgrown by...
Okay, so wait a minute. We point to capitalists growing fast due to industrialization and say that's a virtue of capitalism, but if the same growth but faster happens in socialist states, it's not a virtue of socialism? That seems like an ad hoc way of looking at things, almost like you have biased reasoning.
Another economy that was...
Those are the facts. I mean, you can play whatever games you want. The fact of the matter is that the Soviet Union's performance in the 20th century completely outshines that of Japan. There's no comparison. In 1917, when the Soviet Union begins, it is the poorest country in Europe by far. It then goes through 70 years of a lost World War I, of a civil war, of an agricultural collectivization, and of World War II, which did more damage in Russia than in any other country. Notwithstanding that it was the poorest country at the beginning of this horrific story, it ends up in 1965 being the #1 competitor of the United States for global hegemony. That's only because of its #1 status in economic growth that it achieved the overcoming of all those horrific losses. I'm not arguing in favor of this or that about the Soviet Union, but the fact of its achievement is a staggering reality that you can dance around from here to tomorrow, but it doesn't go away because it's inconvenient to confront it. And the same thing is true now. If you read Pearl Buck's novels about China before the revolution, you will hear about a society whose depth of poverty literally blows your mind. And here they are about to surpass the United States before the end of this decade. And that was accomplished by a communist revolution and a government that has been run by a communist party to this day. And yeah, for sure, they cleverly opened their society up to capitalists to come and join them. But to imagine that the achievement of the Chinese economy is purely due to the private capitalists rather than to the state economy, that's making believe, because you need to have an argument that puts the success at the credit of one or the other. The infrastructure, the training of the mass of people, everything that happened in China is as much a product of the planning and policies of the communist government than of any other factor. And that has to be recognized as well. And none of this is an endorsement. That society has strengths and weaknesses. It has things we can criticize, but we can't make it up because it's inconvenient to face.
So this is what's known as nuance. Some people have a hard time with this part of the brain. The nuance part of like, there's ambiguities and there's not everything's black and white, and that's difficult for a lot of people's brains, especially people that are egomaniacs. Why doesn't D go into the stagnation at the end of Brezhnev era if he wants to pick apart Wolff's example? Wolff specifically states 1965 because that's the beginning of the end for the Union. We could get into that if you want.
The successes they've had and continue to have.
Okay, so
you're
I'm
Genghis
not saying
who put nuance
that
on
the
China. Good
USSR
part.
did not grow a lot. Obviously, the USSR grew massively. Your claim is not that the USSR grew. That's not what we're arguing about. It's whether or not the USSR grew at the rate that it did due to socialism. A country that was
well, it didn't have markets. It didn't have private enterprise. It was planned by the government. Like, what do you mean? What else do you... The government said, build a fucking factory, and they built a factory.
In multiple famines, a country that heavily went from little industrialization to...
The United States had famines. It was called the Dust Bowl. The United States starved and killed millions of indigenous people through disease, starvation, but all those deaths don't matter because they're not white people? Like, you can't talk about the growth of the United States without mentioning the millions of indigenous people that we killed through various means and displaced and abused. You want to talk about the Harlem Door, which is a horrible crime in history. What about, I mean, like, you can't say that capitalism is any better. What are you talking about? It's meaningless. A state did bad shit. No one agrees with that. This is an absurd point. This is an absurd fucking point.
A lot of industrialization and a country that engaged in a lot of imperialistic practices is a country that grew massively in the 20th century. To say that
the imperialistic practices of the Soviet Union pale in comparison to the massive exploitation of the capitalist West. I mean, to call them both imperialist is such a tortured definition of imperialism as to be absurd.
that all of their growth, or even the majority of their growth, was due to the organization of their economy and not due to factors that were independent of that organization. To say
there are plenty of places in the world that did not have communist parties and thus had no growth. We can look at entire swaths of Africa that were under the boot heel of Western imperialism and didn't grow at all. Because, you know, they were being exploited by capitalist imperialists. This is stupid.
Otherwise, that they wouldn't have grown, maybe at an even faster
They did have
rate
some
had they been a
markets,
capitalist
but
economy.
Okay, yes, they did. Golden Gray, you're right, and they had money too.
There would have
But
to
they
be
weren't.
some evidence
It
provided.
wasn't.
For that. I don't believe that
that
that's
was the
ever
exchange of commodities, not planning.
been adequately demonstrated. On the contrary, I believe some people have argued that that Russia could have potentially grown, the USSR could have potentially grown even faster had it abandoned some of its more outdated forms of trying to manage their economy. When we bring up China, China has grown a lot under certain socialist policies for sure. When we look at China, especially in the 80s and 90s, China began opening itself up to massive growth when it comes to foreign investment. China is the number 2 country in the world that allows for foreign direct investment. And the coalescing of all of China's state-owned, the SOEs,
I mean, that just makes sense because they have the second largest economy, so of course they have the second largest foreign direct investment. That's just obvious.
Enterprises into a select few industries, and then the massive opening of foreign investment into that country to give other people more control over privately owned businesses has been what has caused the massive explosion that we've seen of China in terms of pulling people out of global poverty, as you mentioned in the video that you did for the Gravel Institute. You attribute that to socialist policies, but the thing that really pulled China into the 21st century in terms of economic success was the opening itself up to foreign direct investment, was the opening itself up to other economies being able to interact with them more, which are all neoliberal.
By the way, trade is not neoliberal. Trade has existed since the beginning of humanity, when the first person exchanged a coconut for a fish or whatever. Like, trade is not capitalism. Similarly, markets have existed for a very, very, very long time, where you could go with money to a place and buy a different thing. That is not capitalist. That's not a feature of capitalism. It's a feature of human economic relations that have existed for a long time. This is like irrelevant to the point.
Trade policies. These aren't people-owned businesses. These aren't businesses that are ran by the workers. These are, I mean, if anything, China is a government that runs the business itself. It's a state capitalist economy more so than any type of socialist or communist economy. To say that a single-party regime is having the workers themselves making decisions over how any individual business is.
So the question, okay, so this is just semantics. Actually, we're getting to semantics, but what we know China is, they're not liberal democratic capitalism with private ownership of the means of production. That's not what happened. Sorry, but that's not what worked.
Is running, I don't think it's fair to say.
Everything good is capitalism, everything bad is socialism, but let's not moralize economics. Yeah.
I guess one
really,
of and then real quick, just finishing.
Your understanding of China, though, is really badly flawed.
Can I finish this last part? The thing that confuses me the most, and the thing that frustrates me the most, I guess, when I have discussions with socialists, is socialism feels like this very amorphous, ever transforming idea of what it actually is, such that I don't even know why we use the word anymore. So I'm very glad that you've acknowledged that Marx, through his labor theory value analysis, was absolutely flawed and was an absolute failure. I'm glad that you've acknowledged that the way of analyzing.
I have not acknowledged. You're making this stuff up. I've never acknowledged anything of the sort.
Okay, well,
I don't even know where you get this.
Well, earlier you just said that we shouldn't hold ourselves captive to the thinking of thinkers in the 19th century in terms of what socialism is. So I assume you've evolved.
No, I didn't do that at all. I told you that socialism has a variety of theories within it. It's a broad tradition. It had to be. In the 150 years since Marx wrote, his ideas have moved into every country on this earth at different levels of economic and cultural and political life. And of course, those different people all found something valuable, but they all made their own interpretations. This is a rich, diverse tradition. It's as if you're going to decide what it is I mean when I say these things. I never said that the Marxist theory isn't valuable, that the labor theory of value doesn't apply. If you read any of the books and articles I've pumped out in my life, you'd know.
Newsflash, Destiny hasn't read any of the books or articles.
Know that the exact opposite is the case. And I want to correct something. Wait a minute. I want to correct something about China because you keep repeating it. You know why private enterprise and private capital flows into China in the 80s and 90s? Because China had transformed itself from a place where nobody wanted to invest to a place like now where everybody does. Capitalist enterprises went there because they had a well-educated, disciplined labor force at very low wages, because they had built an extraordinary infrastructure, because you had a growing level of income for people to buy things. That's why General Motors produces and sells more cars in China than it does in the United States. The reason private capital went there was because they had, before the arrival, created the institutions. Every other part of the so-called third world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, who had received since the Second World War massive amounts of foreign aid, were desperately trying to do what the Chinese were doing, namely, develop their countries so that foreign private investment would come. China didn't get any foreign aid because they were communists and the United States didn't give them any. But they did a better job than all the countries who did get it in order to get to the point of economic development where it became interesting for capitalists in Japan and Europe to go there. You need to pretend, for reasons I do not understand, that all of the achievements I've just described didn't happen, that somehow they don't deserve the credit. Look, in the world of economics, perhaps you're not familiar, we do exactly what you just said we oughtn't to do. We look at societies and say, they have a capitalist economic system. How did they do? And they have a socialist system with the different meanings of that term. And how did they do? And then we say they're different, and part, not all, part of the story is the different system. And if I say to you that the socialist tradition has multiple interpretations, let me assure you that the capitalist tradition...
Yeah. Do you ever think you're smart in class? The teacher has to let everyone know you don't know as much as you thought. Yeah, this is so embarrassing. This is exactly what I thought it would be, chat. This is exactly what I thought. Just Wolff going, you don't know. As much as I don't like Destiny, listening to Professor Wolff and learning from the stuff he says is worth it. Just having Professor Wolff talk is worth listening to. This is not a debate. This is a lecture with a unruly student. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy. The morning politics guy. Politics Frogs in every single day. Same time, 10 a.m. Day in, day out. And we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about Suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You got to follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid. And you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.